So a couple of years ago, we talked about 10 or maybe a little bit more overrated metal bands that were formed prior to the year 2000. I didn't expect the video to really do all of that much. I figured I'd get a couple of responses here and there, but, well, 60,000 plus views later, it's now actually the #1 video on the channel. I want to thank you guys for that, and I never actually did the follow-up where I talked about bands post-2000, so it's time to finally do that after a 2-year wait. Now, I have to confess that there's going to be a couple of bands on this list that are actually, formed before the year 2000. The reason for this is because early in their career there was very little momentum, either that or there was no real knowledge of the band, and most of the time their overrated status happened after the turn of the millennium. So if there's a couple of bands on here that were formed prior to 2000, and trust me, there are, don't feel the need to actually comment, well, this band actually started in 1998, because I already know that. But let's get started. Here's hopefully 10 or more artists that were formed, or, 10 or more artists that have been overrated ever since the year 2000. Let's just go with that and shut the fuck up. The very first one that we're going to talk about is Lamb of God. Now, this one's not going to make me any friends, but hey, I like the band, and overrated doesn't necessarily mean that, it's a bad band. It just means that they're a bit overrated. Overrated, by definition, really is something that's more geared toward the fan base and more geared to the way in which the public responds to a band. And really, whenever it's a negative attention, something where too many people in overabundance are really just, being assholes about a band in general, either that or it's causing something that really is just not helpful or all of that constructive, that's really what bases something as overrated. It's not necessarily all just based around the product, although sometimes it is. Lamb of God, it's really not based around the product at all. There's only been 1 or 2 albums from these guys that's really been kind of, an off album, so to speak. However, during the period of the 2000s, especially the middle part, after their initial hype period kind of died down a little bit, this was something where there was a lot of people in different areas that were starting to take their love for this band to really obscene levels. I mean, we're talking ridiculous levels. This is something that whenever you walked up to somebody who was the conventional metalhead, you would hear now 3 names as opposed to 2. You would hear Metallica, Pantera, and Lamb of God. And really, I could throw Pantera on here as well, because I really don't think I did on the last list, and if I did, I apologize. But Pantera has definitely gotten a resurgence wave of overratedness in the 2000s, especially near the latter part of the 2000s and the first part of the 2010s. Damn, this is something where it's like a new generation latched onto this band and just kind of caused the whole overrated hype that happened in the latter part of the 90s all the fuck over again. There's nothing wrong with taking things to the extreme, whenever you love your band. Slayer is probably a really good example of this, and really I probably could have included them on a list too, but I don't think I did. But it's been 2 years. I might need a refresher. But with Pantera, this is definitely something where they're not recognizing everything that they've done. They believe that everything began with Cowboys from Hell whenever there was actually 4 albums prior to that. Now, I had a lot of people ask me to do those albums and, cover those albums whenever I did my Pantera discography. But I decided not to do that because, for one, I didn't want to blow all sorts of minds collectively like that. That was something that really seemed kind of combustible and dangerous. But at the same time, these are albums that I could sum up very quickly and very easily. They're kind of a novelty, but they're really not that great. You definitely see some of the earliest inception points of what Pantera was about to become. You definitely could tell that Phil had some vocal talents, even though it was being appropriated to really cheesy power metal. But you could also tell that Dime really could shred. That's about all that you needed to know. It basically served as a catalyst for what was to come with Cowboys from Hell, and the eventual transition into the sound that Pantera fans know and love today. The main reason I lump these two together is because without Pantera there would be no Lamb of God. Well, okay, there might be, but they would be a very different band. Now, let's move on to a couple of others. Let's move on to the Chelsea Grin and Born of Osiris. These two are lumped together because they, at one point, both had Jason Richardson in them. He was originally in Born of Osiris and now resides with Chelsea Grin. This is also a pair of newer bands that are getting to this overrated status, and it's something that's being done more so based around the fact that now every band out there that's of the semi-metal persuasion is now having to incorporate this idea of progression that I keep talking about. Now, one could say that that means I'm overrated because people are taking my advice, but that's not actually why they're doing it. They're doing it because of bands such as this, because it's something that they really hadn't heard before. The problem with this isn't the fact that they want to do that. It's actually kind of good. The problem is actually that these are lifetime band people that, a couple of years prior to that were in a metalcore band, then a couple years before that, or perhaps in an alternative band, or an emo band, or a screamo band. They're basically band members that just follow the trend and hope that, that trend is going to be the one that's going to help them get signed and exposed and get them out on the road and away from their crap town. Yeah, it's a great dream to have, but the problem is that there's already oversaturation with a lot of these trends by the time these bands get overrated and you kind of get wind of them. And based around that, there's just no room for you. This is what really has caused a lot of the overrated status of both of these bands, and it's also something where I like them both. I thought that Chelsea Grin definitely has a lot of momentum going into their new full length, and which I'm excited to hear because of Jason Richardson's involvement. But also, while Born of Osiris' last record was kind of meh, they were coming off a really immense high with the Discovery, so I want to see how they bounce back. The next one is Periphery, and this one's kind of weird to me. This is one that I never expected to actually put on a list like this, but apparently it's true. Apparently a lot of people have taken Periphery worship to a brand new level, and it's something that's kind of weird. Periphery I always kind of dug as a band, mainly because they do all the things that music should all be about. They kind of approach gent and music in general with a generalized, Devin Townsend-like approach, which I really enjoy. But they just do it in a way that's a little bit more geared toward, what's going on with music today. As one of the forefathers of the gent movement, they definitely have a lot to offer. I would throw Tesseract in here as well, but I really don't feel that they've made it to that level. I feel more people lean toward Periphery due to their inclusion in a lot of different compilations and things like that. If I remember, Periphery was just included in a Sumerian Records compilation that was geared toward Florence and the Machine, which is really kind of cool that they diversify like that. But at the same time, why do people go absolutely apeshit and act like that means they're the best thing on the fucking planet? Really, once again, this is something where it's more so the fan base than the music itself. The music is creatively bound, and Periphery 2 is something that definitely gave me a lot of, great and high expectations for the future. And the Clear EP definitely showed that the band was willing to showcase each individual member's diversity, and I really felt that that was executed really nicely. But man, people just fucking freak out about this shit. It's so weird that this is the band that actually kind of grew up to be the overrated one. This would be like if Devin Townsend or Strapping Young Lad were overrated in the first part of the 2000s, or if Fear Factory became too big for its britches, or if a band like, Cybreed broke through. All of those things didn't happen, but damn, what if they did? It's crazy, crazy to think about. This one's not going to make me any friends, but I don't care. It's true. Machine Head. Yeah, Machine Head, I know they formed, in the middle part of the 1990s, and actually had a fair amount of acclaim during the early part of their career. But they had some down moments where they really didn't do, a lot of things right, and then came back with The Blackening. And ever since The Blackening came out, oh my god, the fierce amount of ejaculation that has occurred is absolutely ridiculous. This is an album that exposed a brand new generation to a band that a lot of us older veterans had known about for quite some time. So we already had exposure to this group, and while we knew that this album was definitely fantastic, and it was definitely a step in the right direction, we did not expect the shitstorm that actually occurred from it. This basically revitalized Machine Head's career and gave them something brand new to aim for. Now they had to top The Blackening with every single album. Now, as you saw, Unto the Locust was really unable to do that. But damn if the worship doesn't still goddamn continue. There's worship upon worship upon worship for this band for one album, when in reality, albums such as Burn My Eyes are just as good as well. Sure, the middle-of-the-road material that was released in the latter part of the 90s, first part of the 2000s was kind of questionable, but man, don't freak out over one album. And I'm also sick and goddamn tired of these people that think that if they listen to one album from the band, it's their first album. I had people actually say, hey, why don't you review Machine Head's second album, Unto the Locust, a couple of years ago. It's not their second album. And that's, again, something that I illuminate whenever it comes to any band that has a lot of a high t-shirt following, that now it's just a fashion statement. It's just a fashion trend. Nobody does their fucking research. It's fucking obnoxious. Stop it. Unfortunately, one that I also have to include is Opeth. It's hard for me to do that because they're one of my favorite bands. In fact, for a long time, they basically were the top spot. And this is also a band that started all the way back in 1990, but the acclaim definitely has occurred ever since a lot more people were exposed to this group. That happened around the time of Ghost Reveries coming out, and kind of like Machine Head, everybody kind of blew their load over this album, and then blew their load over Blackwater Park after they heard that, and then collectively took a shit whenever Heritage came out just a couple years ago. Jesus Christ, make up your goddamn minds. You want one thing, but you can't accept the other? Stop it. Stop it! This is the reason why they've become overrated, not just because they've generated a buzz. They've become overrated because the fans are individuals that are kind of just hokey-dokey fans. They're ones that they basically just want what they want, and whenever the band decides to do something else, they decide to get really hostile toward them. Yeah, I understand that Morbid Angel has experienced the same hostility, but that doesn't make them overrated. But the reason why it's definitely hostile in this nature toward Opeth is because they still listen to the album, they still admit that it's a good album, which is good, but at the same time they still freak the fuck out about it. This is something where they can't make up their own minds about what they want. Well, they know what they want. They want to masturbate themselves to death metal vocals and huge riffs, whenever the band has no interest in doing that. I actually really, really commend Opeth for what they're doing. They're basically doing what they want to do, and if it sacrifices them a couple of fans that aren't willing to really, come along for the ride and, really enjoy the experience, well then, good for them. Get the fuck out. They don't want them. I have to give them a lot of credit for that, but damn it, just chill the fuck out. Opeth are going to do what they want, and they've basically proved that. Along those same lines, Mastodon. Mastodon has definitely gotten a lot of people tugging at their chodes lately, and I guess it's fair considering they have a new album coming out. And their discography is fantastic. So once again, what the fuck gives? Why do people freak the fuck out about good bands? This is definitely something you'd think would be reserved for shit, but don't worry, we're getting to that. With Mastodon fans, they're actually pretty chill, but those that are really obsessed really tend to get a bit ridiculous. And that's all I'm going to really say about it. This is one that's kind of a minor gripe that I thought about because of the Opeth thing, but at the same time, they can be just as ridiculous. And also calling them gods live just based around their laser light show and all the fancy shit that they're able to do there. Aside from that, there's no real crowd interaction. It's kind of actually a bummer. I'm not a huge fan of that, but at the same time, I recognize their talents and recognize the fact that they are a great band. In the studio, they're basically untouchable. So now we have to get to the ones that are a little bit more typical, the ones that everyone's kind of expecting to hear. But I have to give my own take on it because, let's face it, if I just regurgitated what everybody else said, that wouldn't make this very original, and that would make me overrated. Bands such as Asking Alexandria and Attila definitely have gotten to the overrated plateau very quickly, and these are basically just trendy mallcore bands, and I call them as such because these are bands that you can get t-shirts of up at the mall. Either that or if you go up to the mall, you're going to see a lot of kids that are wearing the t-shirts. Now you might think that t-shirts are actually a great way to sell merch and, have bands actually stay together, and that's actually a good point. But at the same time, the t-shirts also become a symbol, a signpost, of whether or not a band is actually deserving of all the hype in which they're getting. You talk to some of the people, they don't know what they're talking about. Either that or they're just wearing it because it's a cool and trendy thing to do, or because Hot Topic had a buy one, get one free special. And all of a sudden you start to learn real quick that people are just doing things for stupid reasons. They actually have no idea about the music. Either that or they defend it ridiculously. To be fair, a lot of these fans have been pretty chill people, at least in my area. But I've had a lot of documented cases that have come through my email boxes of people getting very, very offended about some of the different things that people have said. Something just as simple as, I don't like those bands, they really aren't for me, I guess has responded with fierce accusations of being a poser. Either that or just being, a retard. A lot of name calling. This is something where it's a lot of big boy, macho man, machismo that's all coming out of nowhere and kind of doing absolutely nothing constructive. If you're a fan of these bands, just dial it back a little bit and understand that other people aren't going to have the same opinions as you. I would say that again, but yeah. Along those same lines, Suicide Silence and Whitechapel. These are two bands that have a little bit more of a chill fan base, a little bit more of a respectable fan base. Not to mention, these are the ones that typically will gateway their way into traditional forms of death metal a little bit more. But once again, the younger you get, the stupider they get, and it kind of ruins it for the rest of you. They're actually pretty decent fans. Yeah, there's a whole big mess based around what happened to Mitch Lucker, and yeah, that's really tragic that it happened. It's something that actually spawned and really outpoured over into actual society, where there were, threats from the Westboro Baptist Church and, other threats from other forms of the church. That whole satanic propaganda film that was, big a couple of summers ago had some Suicide Silence and Whitechapel lyrics in it. So this is definitely something where both of these bands have gotten national and worldwide attention. That being said, the music is still something that's in an evolutionary process, something that I don't feel has really gotten to the cusp of its greatness. It's instead something that seems to be lulling behind a little bit and kind of falling off. I'm hoping that the singer from All Shall Perish is able to give Suicide Silence a much-needed kick in the backside, and they come back with something that's really powerful. But that's just a dream. We'll have to see if that actually becomes reality. But some of you fans just need to chill the fuck out too. Principally because you think that just having death metal presence in your band, either that or in your collection, makes you a metal fan. But if that's the only thing that you have, you're really just kind of a temporary glitch on the radar. Man, oh man, we've really gotten through a lot so far, and there's really a couple left that I need to speak about once I actually can, think about what the fuck I'm going to talk about next, because there's a lot. I think it's kind of obvious that we could talk about Black Veil Brides and Blood on the Dance Floor, but this is something that's actually been proven. This is something where I don't even necessarily even have to give you a reason. All I have to do is give you the links to 2 videos, and that's basically all I need to do. In fact, that's all that I am going to do. Go to these videos and just view the comments. You don't even have to view what I have to say about these bands, because principally the comments take care of it for me. The final thing that I'm going to talk about is fake metal bands. And by fake metal bands, I don't necessarily mean that, these are bands that are claiming to be metal, but actually aren't. These are bands that are more so of the screamo, post-hardcore persuasion, whatever they're calling it this week, that are being labeled as metal from stupid fans. We're talking about Overrated Nature. And with Overrated Nature usually comes, that's right, stupid fans. We're talking about the bands, the people that listen to the Pierce the Veils, the Drugs, the Bless the Falls, the Escape the Fates. Stuff like that that's actually in the pop rock section, and wisely so. That definitely have a little bit more of a root in the screamo variety or the, the post-punk or pop-punk variety, if you want to go as far as to A Day to Remember and things like that. This is something where the fans need to just chill the fuck out and understand the fact that they're not listening to a metal band. It's not really that much to ask, and really if you think that you have to listen to metal or claim that what you listen to is metal is what it takes to be cool or whatever in your high school, well, that's kind of dumb. Instead, you should just be proud of what you listen to. And if everyone is circulating that that's what metal is these days, wow, that's more of metal being in trouble than baby metal. Because baby metal is actually not that much trouble at all. These are individuals that just need to take a step back and relax, and these are bands that don't need to actually fucking promote the fact, because they're not. They're not metal bands. These are bands that definitely have a far different persuasion to them. And this is something that really needs to stop, but I'm just one man. This is a whole scene that's really becoming just laced and littered with this fucking garbage bullshit. It was almost like whenever Atreyu came out, everyone was kind of labeling them in that direction as well, until they themselves migrated into the opposite direction, thankfully so. Sure, the music suffered. There was really never an album that was just as good as Suicide Notes and Butterfly Kisses, but at least we knew what the fuck they were. At least they understood their identity and where they wanted to gravitate toward. And still they were able to tour with bands such as Avenged Sevenfold and, Bullet for My Valentine that have come up along with them, and it's something that still generated some success. There's one more, Bullet for My Valentine. This is a band that's really gone from A-OK to shit-tay in a New York minute. Whenever their first couple of albums came out, everybody was able to get excited, and the whole entire fan base erupted. And then we got to the shit album, and man, oh man, try to actually have an opinion about Temper Temper that's not the same as a positive fan of the bands. Try. It's impossible. Principally because these are people that worship everything that Bullet for My Valentine does, and doesn't recognize the shit. These are the same fans that actually, listen to every single Trivium album and think that they've been getting better as a band. This is something that's not even close to true, especially whenever you have David Draymond as your producer. I could talk about Disturbed again, but why bother? This is something that kind of would have a little bit more resonance in the last video, but sure, let's throw that in. Let's just throw David Draymond and say that he's an overrated fucking hack, because he truly is. Disturbed fans really need to understand that they've just been putting out the same record over and over again, but they've been getting progressively worse and worse. And then Device, let's not even speak about that. That's a gigantic pile, a gigantic mound of bullshit. Many people probably think that I would include a band such as Queensryche on this list, considering tons of people still defend their crap albums. But whenever you actually look at it, not as many people defend these albums as you might think. Even if you just look at the comments of the videos that I've posted on albums such as Dedicated to Chaos or Frequency Unknown, or even the positive review that I did on the self-titled record, the one thing that you'll see is that comments tend to be, pretty mixed, with the exception to the Queensryche video for the self-titled release, where there's been nothing but universal acclaim. So this is something where they're really not overrated. It's just something where finally there's been a little bit of recognition from the fan base that things have kind of taken a negative turn. Hopefully that's all been squared away now that that whole situation's been resolved. Aside from all that, I think we're done here. I know that there's definitely more, and I know that you're going to remind me of all of these in the comments. So go ahead and do that, and maybe we'll do a part 2 to this. And definitely, let's try to shoot to make this one just as important as the first. Principally because this is information that needs to be, heard. These overrated bands aren't necessarily bad bands. In fact, for a lot of these, you'll probably say that, hey, that band's really good. I kind of like them. Once again, I can't reiterate the fact enough. Being an overrated band doesn't necessarily mean that a band is bad. It just means that some people need to dial it back a little bit and, kind of calm down. So, are you one of those people that need to calm down? It's possible. Hell, it's possible that I'm one of those people that need to calm down. But at the same time, at the end of the day, these bands are kind of overrated. Some of them definitely so. But in the end, that's what being a fan is all about. Some bands are going to have that, others won't. And the ones that don't, they lust for it. So if one of the bands that you love has just been called overrated, take it as a badge of honor. Because that definitely means that not only have they made it, but they're definitely being talked about by their fan base and other people. Well, that's all that I have. Leave me some bands in the comments that you think were overrated and formed, a little bit before the 2000s or after the 2000s. And I'll talk to you guys next time.